Welcome in. I am so glad you decided to join us for today's deep dive.
Yeah, it's a really special one today.
It really is. Because the document we have on the table, it's one of the most uniquely profound texts we have ever had the privilege to explore.
Truly profound.
Right. So we are looking at a true autobiographical account.
Written in the year 2026.
Exactly. By an author named Gaetjens. But right out of the gate, we really need to establish the premise for you.
Because this is definitely not a standard memoir.
No, not at all. It is an exploration of two distinct identities.
Gaetjens and Jean.
Right, Gaetjens and Jean. And they share a single physical body.
They live with dissociative identity disorder, or DDAGN.
And our mission today is to explore their profoundly unique internal dynamic.
Tracking how this fierce internal divide eventually evolved.
Evolved into a shared collaborative purpose, which is just incredible to read.
Setting the emotional landscape for this text is critical, though, before we delve into the mechanics of their lives.
Yeah, how would you describe that landscape?
Well, when approaching an autobiographical account dealing with DD, there's often a cultural expectation of a sensationalized narrative.
Oh, absolutely. Like something out of a movie.
Right. Or conversely, it goes the other way and becomes a highly clinical, pathologized case study.
Dry and detached.
Exactly. But this source material rejects both of those frameworks completely.
It really does. It's deeply intimate.
Intimate, fiercely intelligent, and notable for its wry, self-aware humor.
The humor really surprised me, honestly.
Right. We are examining an account where the relationship between these two identities is presented not as a psychiatric anomaly to be cured,
But as a completely natural and emotionally real existence.
yes, to them, this shared internal landscape is their baseline reality.
And the text demands that we respect that reality rather than dissect it from a detached distance.
That demand for respect is evident on every single page.
It is. As we guide you through this document, we are going to look at the sheer awe-inspiring power of the human mind
The extreme lengths to which the mind will go to protect itself from unbearable pain.
and the absolute limits of pure, unyielding logic.
Plus, that long, complicated journey toward internal collaboration rather than competition.
Okay, let's unpack this by going back to the historical starting point of the document.
Right, because the text establishes a profound contrast by taking us back to the year 2013.
A period when the identity named Jean was the one in charge.
The year 2013 serves as the crucible for this entire narrative.
Because at that time, Jean was the identity who was fronting,
And fronting meaning he was the one actively engaging with the world,
making the decisions.
speaking and controlling their shared behavior.
The text provides a highly specific demographic and psychological profile of Jean, too.
It does. He is male, described essentially as a bachelor physics type.
A bachelor physics type. That paints such a specific picture.
It really does. And he operates as a strict logical positivist.
The choice to highlight his logical positivism is fascinating when you consider the function of an identity within a DID system.
Oh, it's the perfect defense.
Right. Operating from a philosophical framework that dismisses anything that cannot be empirically measured or scientifically proven.
It serves as the ultimate cognitive firewall.
Exactly, a firewall. If a traumatic memory or a sudden inexplicable emotional bleed-through cannot be quantified, weighed, or plotted on a graph,
Then Jean's worldview automatically categorizes it as irrelevant.
or non-existent.
It functions as an impenetrable defense mechanism,
The text illustrates a man who is fiercely fact-oriented.
speaking in precise, heavily qualified sentences.
He is deeply uncomfortable with ambiguity
Consequently, he is entirely alienated from his own emotional life.
because emotions lack operational definition.
They resist neat categorization. They're messy.
And Jean's response to that messy reality was extreme emotional containment,
He lived almost exclusively within his intellect,
heavily insulated from anything that might disrupt his empirical understanding of the world.
which meant his physical life reflected that intense isolation as well.
Yeah, the text notes that Jean had virtually no social life outside of attending Alcoholics Anonymous meetings.
He was navigating the world through this incredibly narrow, cold lens of physics and logic.
Completely walled off from human intimacy.
But then the text introduces a massive behavioral
A
anomaly.
huge pivot. Out of nowhere, in 2013, this hyperlogical physics bachelor makes an abrupt decision.
To pursue clinical licensure at Roosevelt University.
He pivots hard from the hard sciences into psychology.
Which begs the question, how does a mind so rigidly devoted to the measurable suddenly throw itself into the ultimate soft science?
What's fascinating here is the underlying architecture of that decision.
The text explicitly reveals that Gene's pursuit of clinical psychology was not born of his own conscious intellect.
No, it says it was motivated by the then latent part, Gaetjens.
We need to consider the immense psychological gravity of that dynamic for a second.
It's massive. In
Okay.
2013, Gene possessed absolutely no conscious awareness of Gaetjens' existence.
He did not know he had DID.
Yet deep within the subconscious structure of their shared mind, Gaetjens was there.
The deeply buried emotional identity who held the actual memory of their trauma,
And she was exerting an invisible pull.
subtly steering the fiercely logical front into the precise field of study required to facilitate their eventual healing,
It operates like a highly sophisticated, covert rescue operation.
where the operative doesn't even know they're being directed,
Gene rationalized this pivot as a sudden intellectual curiosity,
completely blind to the fact that his own mind was essentially tricking him.
tricking him into walking toward the medicine he desperately needed but would consciously reject.
And the nature of his coursework at Roosevelt University highlights how Gene attempted to maintain his logical armor even while studying the mind.
Right, he wasn't engaging in deep, empathetic clinical role play or anything like that.
No, his work largely consisted of writing extensive reviews of clinical research literature,
He remained firmly in the realm of the academic,
the peer-reviewed.
the quantifiable.
And within that literature, he developed an intense, almost magnetic focus on post-traumatic stress disorder.
The irony is palpable there.
The deeply traumatized mind gravitates directly toward the study of trauma.
The text provides a crucial insight into his mindset during this period, too.
Gene actually suspected he might have PTSD himself.
But he actively blocked the thoughts or suspicions.
This is the hallmark of a highly intellectualized defense strategy.
When an intensely logical mind is forced into proximity with a terrifying emotional truth, it uses academic detachment to neutralize the threat,
Gene approached the concept of trauma not by feeling it,
or by seeking therapeutic intervention for himself.
but by studying it from a safe theoretical distance.
He transformed his own unacknowledged pain into a literature review.
Which is wild. Have you ever thrown yourself into researching a problem to avoid the emotional labor of actually dealing with it?
Gene took that common human avoidance tactic to a staggering level.
He built a fortress out of academic citations and methodology critiques.
To keep himself safe from his own internal reality.
And that academic fortress was about to lead him directly into the central, heartbreaking irony of the entire autobiographical account.
Here's where it gets really interesting.
In 2013, while deep in his graduate studies, Gene authored what the text presents as his magnum opus.
It was an unpublished student paper titled Interidentity Amnesia in Dissociative Identity Disorder.
The author meticulously details the academic weight of this paper to emphasize Gene's absolute dedication to logical rigor,
Rendered in expansive APA version 7 format
stretching to 19 pages.
of approximately 4,800 words.
Gene was not passively summarizing textbooks here.
He was actively dissecting a complex brain imaging study alongside 8 other laboratory experiments.
He was hunting for empirical, undeniable proof of interidentity amnesia.
That diagnostic criterion where one identity cannot recall the actions of another.
The friction here is incredible. Gene, occasionally referred to in this academic context as Alan or Gene Naden, was growing increasingly agitated by the research he was reviewing.
Because the phenomena being interpreted as manifestations of memory across these studies were highly diverse.
And deeply subtle.
For someone who demands empirical certainty, diversity and subtlety are infuriating.
They lacked operational definitions.
For a logical positivist, attempting to measure a phenomena that lacks a strict operational definition is an exercise in futility.
Furthermore, the text notes Gene's deep frustration with the lack of consensus in the field,
Specifically highlighting the painful ideological split between the peer community of trauma survivors and the clinical establishment.
He was analyzing a field in theoretical chaos.
Looking for mathematical certainty where none existed.
So we have Gene poring over nearly a dozen scientific studies.
Desperately searching for hard data that proves the memory barrier goes up when an identity switches.
He wants unambiguous brain scan data.
He wants controlled laboratory validation.
And because the data relies so heavily on subjective self-reporting and nuanced behavioral shifts,
It fails to meet his impossible standard of physics.
when the data fails to meet the strict parameters of a logical positivist, the positivist is forced to reject the premise entirely.
The text reveals that Gene reluctantly aligned with the skeptical majority of clinicians of that era.
He concluded his massive 19-page exhaustive review with a definitive fatalistic sentence.
Amnesia not demonstrated in the laboratory.
Amnesia not demonstrated in the laboratory.
The weight of that conclusion, given the context, is staggering.
It evokes a profound sense of shared recognition and melancholy,
The author presents this not as an indictment of Gene's intellect.
but with deep empathy for his blindness.
Here is a man who dedicated weeks of intense academic labor producing 4,800 words to rigorously prove that interidentity amnesia did not exist.
He achieved this while operating as an actively amnesic identity,
He was entirely blind to decades of his own trauma.
and completely oblivious to the parallel consciousness of Gaetjens existing within his own mind.
The author captures this tragedy with a haunting metaphor.
Noting that Gene had for decades drunk deeply the wine of D, while objectively disproving its core mechanism on paper,
The scientist was the experiment.
utterly unaware that he was trapped in the laboratory.
He utilized the specific tools designed to uncover the truth,
Science, logic, empirical review.
to flawlessly construct a cognitive blind spot.
It forces a reevaluation of the hyperlogical worldview entirely.
When empirical data is the sole metric for reality, a psychological condition that functions specifically by obscuring data from conscious awareness becomes perfectly invisible.
This raises an important question regarding how the broader scientific community has historically handled the messy, unquantifiable realities of severe trauma.
Gene's academic frustration was not merely a personal failing.
No, it was a microcosm of a massive ongoing historical debate within psychology.
The text anchors us firmly in those historical footings, though.
It acknowledges the long-standing belief that DD is rooted in severe past traumatic experiences.
Tracing the genesis of this understanding back to the French physician and psychologist Pierre Genet.
Pierre Genet's work at the Salpêtrière Hospital in Paris during the 1880s and 1890s is foundational to understanding the architecture of Gene and Gaetjens' mind.
The text makes a point to mention that Janet was a contemporary of Sigmund Freud.
But emphasizes that their theoretical approaches diverged significantly.
While Freud popularized the concept of repression,
The idea of pushing uncomfortable urges down into the unconscious.
Janet was observing something entirely different in patients subjected to overwhelming stress.
Janet became the founding theorist of dissociation.
He articulated the concept of a literal splitting of the self.
Janet recognized that when a mind is subjected to trauma that exceeds its capacity to process or integrate, it compartmentalizes.
It constructs an amnesic barrier,
This allows one facet of the self, like Gene, to continue functioning in the external world,
rigidly adhering to daily routines.
while another facet, Gaetjens, holds the unbearable emotional memory in isolation.
Yet the text fast forwards from the 1890s to the author's present perspective in 2026 to highlight a frustrating reality.
The controversy surrounding DID and interidentity amnesia remains largely unresolved in the broader clinical world.
To illustrate this ongoing ambiguity, the authors detail a query they submitted to the AI Claude.
Seeking a definitive operational definition of memory.
The AI's response provided a critical framework that Gene had starved for back in 2013.
The definition the AI provided is essential to their current worldview.
It stated memory has been demonstrated if and only if prior exposure to a stimulus at time t produces a measurable difference in behavior at time t plus interval compared to what would have occurred without that prior exposure.
We must analyze why this specific, somewhat sterile definition holds such immense value for the authors.
It strips away the subjective ambiguity that plagued Gene.
It establishes a concrete, undeniably observable foundation.
It posits that memory is not merely an internal feeling or a recounted narrative.
It is a measurable behavioral delta over time.
This is the exact kind of unassailable operational logic that could bridge the gap between Gene's demand for physical proof and Gaetjens' lived reality.
It takes the invisible phenomena of the mind and tethers it to measurable behavior.
But to truly understand how they utilize this definition to forge a path forward, we have to examine the profound shift in their internal dynamic.
We have to leave the 2013 era of Gene behind and engage with the present reality of 2026.
Where the balance of power has fundamentally changed.
The current reality is starkly different.
In 2026, it is Gaetjens who fronts.
She is the identity engaging with the world, making the choices, and authoring this document.
The contrast between the two identities is absolute.
Where Gene was a cold, logical male physics bachelor, Gaetjens is female.
She characterizes herself as an interpersonally warm, passionate individual.
She possesses a high degree of emotional intelligence and significant creative capacity.
That emotional depth is immediately apparent in the tone of her writing, too.
Her voice is a radical departure from the sterile, qualified prose of Jean's 19-page clinical review.
Gaetjens writes with an intimate, intelligent, and notably wry perspective.
Crucially, she completely avoids clinical detachment.
Yet she never veers into self-pity.
She navigates the complex, bizarre reality of their shared existence with a grounded, self-aware humor.
There is a specific detail regarding her relationship with language that perfectly encapsulates her emotional intelligence.
She knows her hesitation regarding pronouns, writing, "I am shy about claiming my true pronouns, we and us."
That admission reveals a profound layer of psychological nuance.
Her shyness around using plural pronouns demonstrates a high level of social awareness.
Recognizing the friction it causes in a society unequipped to understand their reality.
But on a deeper level, it illustrates a profound inherent respect for Jean.
Even though she is now the dominant front, she refuses to erase him.
She acknowledges the collective nature of their existence.
She embraces the complexity that Jean was desperate to eradicate.
Jean required absolute mathematical proof of his environment to feel safe.
Gaetjens is entirely comfortable existing within paradox.
She accepts the state of not knowing everything with empirical certainty.
And it is precisely that emotional flexibility that allowed her to recognize the truth of their existence.
Jean needed a brain scan to prove he was traumatized.
Gaetjens simply possessed the capacity to look inward and accept the emotional reality of their shared history.
That shift in dominance from the logical protector who blindly denied the trauma to the emotional core who was capable of acknowledging it fundamentally reordered their existence.
So what does this all mean for their daily life now that Gaetjens is navigating the world?
How does she carry the weight of what Jean kept hidden?
The text is unflinchingly honest about the gravity of that realization.
Gaetjens states, "We now know that we, or simply Jean, experienced multiple traumatic experiences spanning decades.
Consider the magnitude of that sentence.
For decades, the body they share endured severe trauma."
And Jean, operating as the front, absorbed those experiences while simultaneously deploying his logical positivism to remain completely blind to them.
Gaetjens' phrasing, "we, or simply Jean," is a masterclass in internal empathy.
She does not condemn his blindness.
She understands it was the necessary mechanism for their survival.
Navigating the aftermath of that realization in 2026 has deeply influenced their current social architecture.
Gaetjens openly discusses their personal life, noting that they are quite codependent on the people in our social circle.
I find her use of the word codependent fascinating here.
From a clinical perspective, a marriage or social circle built heavily on psychological triage sounds incredibly fragile.
Is that a sustainable dynamic based on what the text reveals?
It's a highly valid concern, and Gaetjens anticipates that clinical skepticism.
She clarifies that their primary modality for experiencing intimacy is through the giving and receiving of psychological support.
We have to view this through the lens of their history.
Recall Jean's initial pivot in 2013.
While he didn't become a licensed clinician, the text notes he honorably completed a counseling master's degree aimed at nurses and teachers.
They possess formal training in support structures.
They have essentially taken their massive internal necessity for healing and externalized it.
Creating an ecosystem of mutual psychological aid.
They took the internal need and turned it into their primary method of connection with the external world.
She even applies this directly to their recent marriage.
With her characteristic wry honesty, she admits the marriage is top-heavy with a helping dynamic.
But she immediately counters the expected clinical judgment by asserting that the relationship is, in fact, thriving.
She is prioritizing her lived emotional reality over sterile clinical assessments.
She acknowledges that a textbook might flag a top-heavy helping dynamic as problematic.
But she insists on the functional success of their specific bond.
Furthermore, she notes that engaging in this helping dynamic yields profound results in their broader social circle.
She writes that individuals affected by trauma frequently express gratitude, respect, and inspiration in response to her activities.
She specifically notes that this positive impact is most pronounced in group interactions rather than isolated one-on-one encounters.
Her unique psychological architecture, the ability to hold multiple perspectives, her profound empathy, and her direct lived experience with severe trauma likely makes her an incredibly stabilizing force in a group setting.
She is utilizing the fractured nature of her own mind to facilitate healing within a broader community.
which seamlessly transitions into the final, highly forward-looking segment of her account.
Having navigated the historical trauma and stabilized their present reality, Gaetjens introduces a highly specific, ambitious research dream for their future.
She states that, like many individuals with divided identities, she desires integration.
She wants to dismantle the internal firewalls and achieve at least partial wholeness.
But her proposed method for achieving this is not confined to private therapy.
She intends to channel her passion into investigating and raising public awareness of familial trauma and its sequelae.
Her stated objective is quietly resolute. One way or another, I will help people like me, hopefully, with more consistent positive outcomes.
But the true brilliance of their shared mind is revealed in the specific vector they have chosen for this investigation.
They are not focusing their research on the subjective experience of dissociation or the volatility of emotional dysregulation.
They have chosen to investigate memory.
Memory is the linchpin.
It is the core mechanism that divided them, and it is the mechanism they intend to use to unite.
Gaetjens outlines two distinct reasons for this focus.
First, memory issues transcend the trauma survivor demographic.
Investigating memory addresses a massive universal vulnerability, touching sweeping populations, including those dealing with dementia.
It broadens their impact significantly.
The second reason is where the profound synthesis of Jean and Gaetjens truly occurs.
Gaetjens notes that memory investigations probe brain function with significantly less ambiguity than studies focused on emotional dysregulation.
Why? Because returning to the Claude AI query memory possesses an operational definition.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this is the philosophical climax of the document.
The choice to study memory represents the ultimate elegant collaboration between two previously diametrically opposed identities.
Jean, the logical positivist, requires measurable physical processes.
Gaetjens, the passionate empath, requires the acknowledgement of psychological reality and emotional truth.
Memory sits at the exact intersection of their disparate worldviews.
As Gaetjens writes in a beautifully synthesized concluding thought, memory is both a physical process and a manifestation of mind.
The physical process, the measurable difference in behavior at time t plus interval, satisfies Jean's demand for scientific rigor.
The manifestation of mind, the subjective experience of the trauma survivor, honors Gaetjens' domain of emotional truth.
By committing their future to the investigation of memory, they have engineered a shared purpose.
They are no longer engaged in an internal war over what constitutes reality.
They have found a mission where the tools of the logical positivist and the empathy of the emotional core are both absolutely essential.
It is a breathtaking resolution to an incredibly complex psychological divide.
It transforms a history of severe trauma and profound internal blindness into a unified, outward-facing mission.
To briefly recap the monumental arc we've explored today.
We began with Jean, a rigidly logical man, utilizing the rigorous frameworks of science and academia to unknowingly maintain a massive cognitive blind spot regarding his own trauma.
Even going so far as to academically disprove the very amnesic barriers that were keeping him functional.
We then tracked the shift to Gaetjens, the emotionally intelligent, wry, and warm identity, who stepped forward to acknowledge the undeniable truth of their shared history.
Finally, we arrived at their beautiful integrated future, utilizing the operational definition of memory to bridge the chasm between logic and emotion with the ultimate goal of facilitating healing for others.
The core takeaway from this text is that it vehemently rejects the tragedy narrative often applied to Gaetjens.
This is not a story of a broken, despairing mind.
It is a testament to profound internal teamwork, mutual respect, and the staggering resilience of the human psyche as it navigates from survival toward a thriving, collaborative existence.
To you listening, thank you for joining us on this intricate, deeply human exploration.
Engaging with a text this complex requires a significant degree of empathy and intellectual curiosity, and we deeply appreciate you taking the time to truly explore these nuances with us.
Before we conclude, I want to leave you with a final, lingering thought to mull over.
We have examined how a highly educated, deeply rational mind utilized the respected, rigorous tools of science and logic to flawlessly hide its own most painful truths from itself.
So consider your own worldview.
If logic can be used as an ultimate shield against reality, how much of our own objective reality, the hard facts we cling to every day, the logical frameworks we build our lives upon, are actually just brilliant invisible defense mechanisms designed by our brains to keep us safe from what we aren't quite ready to feel?
Think about that.
Until next time.